Hi everybody, I'm David. I'm an alcoholic. Sobriety date is October the 23rd, 1997. I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group. I have a sponsor. He has a sponsor, and I sponsor. I got to say one thing, though. For you guys don't realize how lucky you are. And I'm not saying that for my own ego, but this has probably got to be one of the few home groups, at least in this part of the state and maybe into the edge of South Carolina, that for the second week in a row, you got a speaker who's from Maxton, North Carolina. You were here last week to hear Chuck, and I'm going to tell this story now right at the start in case I forget later when I get going. But soon after I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, actually I had a little short run when I went through outpatient treatment in '96. So I'm sure I probably saw him at the big beginners meeting that used to be out at the hospital in the conference room. And you got to be around here for a while. That's probably been at least 10 years ago or more. That building's not even there now. But anyway, that's where I ended up picking up my white chip when I started this deal back in '97. And anyway, there was a group of guys that kind of sat there on this counter in the back. It was Chuck, John Tyner, and Anthony B. Anthony's not really around these rooms much anymore, still sober. Anyway, so I just kind of migrated back there with those guys, and Chuck and I weren't like buddies or anything, but we knew each other, and probably I'd maybe been sober 7 or 8 years, and my home group at the time was Big Book, and Chuck had come over to tell his story, and I knew nothing about him, and so not only did I find out that he was from Maxton, which is where I'm from. But now I will say I got the hell out of there when I was 5. My family moved to Aberdeen. If I'd have stayed down there through high school like you did, I might have been as bad as Chuck. But luckily I got out. I'm bad enough. But anyway, and then found out not only that we're both from Maxton. Our dads worked for the same company, what was Carolina Power and Light. His dad was in the Aberdeen office and mine was in the Southern Pines office. And of course, found out we also pulled for that team up in Raleigh that does cause a lot of heartbreak and heartache. But anyway, so we got to be even better friends after that, and have been for some time. So I just had to tell that up front. But as I said, I'm pretty much an Aberdeen boy. I was born in I guess the same hospital you were in Lumberton, right, Chuck?
I was in
Asheville. Okay. Well, I was born in Lumberton, so and my family was living in Maxton, as I said. So we moved up here when I was 5. And, there was probably a time when my ego would like to tell you now that I lived up in the upper part of Aberdeen as opposed to lower Aberdeen. And the first time I ever told my story, I was I don't even know if I was 2 years sober. It was here. It was the Aberdeen meeting. And I always have to laugh when I come in the back way because I go by where the turn is, where that Colonial Heights athletic or the baseball field is. And one of my favorite memories growing up, which illustrates perfectly the sort of the way I was growing up, I was on this little league baseball team, and I don't know, 7, 8 years old. I was the most unathletic person you can imagine, but I really wanted to do that so I could fit in with the guys. My next door neighbor, who his dad owned the Western Auto in Aberdeen, and it was their team, and I wanted to play so bad. And hit the Bowles, Richard Bowles, my next door neighbor. I grew up in his shadow, and anyway, so I finally got put in, and I was so excited. Now they stuck me in either right field or left field. It's the one where nobody ever hits to. So they figured they'll just stick me out there. He said just go stand there, and lo and behold, the first batter up hits one right to me, and I stick out my brand new glove, and the ball hits right there and bounces off. And it's like that was pretty much the end of my playing baseball, at least in the outfield. I did get to bat one time, and I was told not to swing and just to stand there. And I'd either get. There's a kid in the movie Bad News Bears. I'm sure I modeled after, but just stand there, and you either get hit. Yes, you'll get hit by a pitch. He said if you want to lean into one, and of course, being the chicken I wouldn't about to let that happen. And I got walked, and I got on base, and then the next guy hit into a double play, and that was the end of my baseball career. And I went to Aberdeen Middle School, and I thought I'm probably I didn't hit my growth spurt until I was 18, so I was just this scrawny little kid. So I thought I didn't do well at baseball, So I thought, okay, I'll try football. And so basically in middle school football, I was on the third string. And for those of you that understand what third string in middle school football means, is you're basically a tackling dummy for the starters. They just stand you out there and say, here, just stand here, and somebody will come by in a minute and usually run over me is what happened. And, but I had it in my mind, even then, at that early age, that somehow I could be somebody. And I just never could. I just never could do it athletically. And so the other side of them, with my family, I have a sister who's 2 years younger than me, and of course I told you what my dad did. And my mom was a piano teacher, private piano teacher, and a church organist. And so my sister was very musical. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try that. Maybe someday I'll be on Broadway. And so I thought I took piano from my mom, and I know my mom loves me, but after about 9 months of teaching me piano, she basically fired me and pawned me off on another friend of hers to teach me piano, because I guess she realized I wasn't serious. And I sang in choir at the First Baptist Church in Southern Pines, where I grew up, where she was the organist, and she was the youth choir director, and I got thrown out of youth choir by my own mom one time for cutting up. So I'm kind of painting a picture of the way I was, and I was a type of kid that I liked to do things for attention, and that got me in trouble a lot. And the neighborhood I grew up in, two other stories that are quite telling of the way I was and the lengths that I would go to sort of get accepted by people. I got talked into going into the Winn-Dixie one time. I was probably middle school age, and said, why don't you go in there and get a pack of cigarettes? So I took it literally. I wasn't going in there to pay for them. I was just going in there to get them. And so I got nabbed by the manager of the Winn-Dixie at the Town and Country Shopping Center for shoplifting cigarettes. And it turned out he was the husband of my second grade teacher. So rather than call the police, they called my dad. And I really wish they'd called the police, because my dad was a strict... He believed in corporal punishment, and I paid for that one dearly. And you'd think I'd learned my lesson on something like that. And about a year later, I got talked into doing it again at another store, and I got caught shoplifting at the Christian bookstore. And again, they went to church with us. So rather than call the police, they called Dad. And again, I wish they called the police. And I share those stories again. They kind of illustrate the way I was. By the time I got to Pinecrest, which is where I went to high school, I was kind of watching all these other kids that seemed to be doing. They seemed to know what they were doing, and they seemed to be successful, and they seemed to have friends. And I mean, I had friends, but I just never really had anywhere where I really felt like I fit in. And I kind of always had that feeling of less than a little bit, and that everybody else seemed to have always better stuff than I did. And there was something that Chuck said last week that really rung with me about the fear. I just was afraid. I was afraid of people, I guess. And so my junior year in high school, I discovered something that was just so wonderful, and it was alcohol. We used to have an event here out Youngs Road, this little thing called Stony Brook. World's largest outdoor cocktail party is what it used to be called. And I was a junior in high school, and again on a dare, somebody said, why don't you, because they have these big lavish tailgate parties, and when the races come, everybody goes down to the rail to watch the races, and so they leave their booze and their food, and somebody said, why don't you go grab a bottle of liquor? So I did. I got a fifth of something that was clear, vodka, rum, or gin. I'm pretty sure it wasn't tequila, and I drank it. I drank the whole fifth, and that didn't turn out well. I ended up passed out, got sick in my car, and when I woke up, it was me and a Moore County Sheriff's deputy, and they said, we need you to get your car off this property. It's private property, but you do not drive home. Somebody needs to come get you. And now this was in 1979, so I don't know how, there weren't cell phones back then, so I don't know how they thought I was going to call anybody. So I waited for him to drive off, And for those of you that remember where Stony Brook is, so I'd come into town. I just got in the car and I'm going to drive home. I go right down May Street. Police station's 1 block over from my church. So I got my church on 1 block. And my mom is waiting on me there because I'm supposed to be at a rehearsal for an Easter thing the next day. And the police station over here, and they're lined up coming out the police station for the breathalyzers. So I go straight on home and announced to my dad that I just didn't feel like stopping at church, that I just needed to go on home. And of course, he got one whiff of me and knew why I didn't want to go to church. And I got in a little bit of trouble. And you'd have thought maybe that bad experience would have made me think twice about ever wanting to do that again. And but something wonderful happened when I got to school on Monday. At least these people that I used to I knew who the party crowd were, and I had these people coming up and telling me all this crazy stuff that I was doing Saturday that I apparently don't remember. So I was obviously, the first time I got drunk, I was in a blackout, and I was playing along like I knew all of it, and I finally found a crowd of people I fit in with, and this was in April, so I went through the end of my junior year and summer, and then into my senior year, and I managed to do enough to graduate, but I was more interested in partying with the cool people, and but a lot of my friends were getting ready to go off to college, and I sort of didn't think about that until the end of my senior year. But I graduated and ended up out here at Sandhills Community College, which actually didn't turn out to be a bad thing. I was, the partying was on the weekends, and it was fun. And this university that Chuck and I pulled for, which is where my dad went, which is where I thought I wanted to go, I got my grades up enough out at Sandhills that I got accepted. And so I moved up to Raleigh, and I thought I've arrived. This is awesome. And I moved into an apartment with 3 other guys, including a guy that grew up across the street from me. And he was like number 4 in my class at Pinecrest. He was a nuclear engineering major. The guy was smart. He also played bass in a band that won the Battle of the Bands up there that year, and he was also a marijuana dealer. I didn't know this until I got up there, and a dealer. And so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that substance, but needless to say, I had a really good year up there, and the key word is year, because by the second semester I was not going to class, and universities don't really appreciate that, and so I got a letter basically inviting me not to come back unless I wanted to go to summer school. And I just didn't have any interest in that. I turned 21. I hit 21 that April, and so after that great year, I'm back home with my mom and dad and back under their roof again, and not real wild about it. But this little part-time job I had at the radio station that I had kept while I was at school, I'd come back on holidays and stuff. Well, they had a full-time job open up that summer, and so I took it. It was an evening position, and so I didn't really see any consequences of partying my way out of school. I got a full-time job, and within 6 months I was back out in a house with 2 other guys, and I had that freedom again, which is a dangerous thing. As it turns out, when I look back over the course of my, at least the drinking part of my life, freedom was not always a good thing for me. But I had that end of that summer, my job changed, and I ended up being the morning guy, so I had to be at work at 6 o'clock. And for a long time, that kind of held the drinking in check, because it's, you don't want to be partying and then have to go to work hungover, and so I kept it in check for 3 or 4 years. But alcohol, I'm the type of person that when I start drinking, and it was true from the first time to the last time that I drank, when I put alcohol in me, I don't stop. I don't have an off switch. So if I didn't drink on a Tuesday night, that's fine. But eventually, when I did start to drink on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night and a Monday night, Wednesday nights were okay. That seemed to be an acceptable night to drink for some reason. But on those other nights, the problem was if I had a drink, I drank more, and I always got drunk. I never had a drink in my life. I never had a beer in my life, because when there was one, there was always going to be a lot more. And, in your mid-20s, it's easy to kind of bounce back and be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning and make it sound like you're happy and you're fired up about being at work. Of course, a pot of coffee and a half a pack of cigarettes will make anybody sound happy. That was what got me through for a long, long time. But that the drinking was starting to become a problem going into my late 20s. And the other thing that I did, and I can look back on it, and it was definitely in an alcoholic state of mind, was in an unhealthy relationship that was off and on again with somebody a lot older than me, with two grown kids that had been married 2 times before. And against the advice of my parents, I married her. And needless to say, that was not a smart move on my part. But when my parents told me that I shouldn't do it, then I decided right then and there I was going to do it. Even at 29, they tell me no, I'm going to do it, and that's what I did. And I used to believe that that was the reason I became an alcoholic, because after I got married and got in way over my head, not knowing what I'd gotten myself into, I became a daily drinker. And I think 6 months into the marriage, she asked me one time, "Did you drink this much when we were dating?" And I said, "I drink about the same. I drink about the same I always drink." She said, "Well, it seems like you drink a lot." So I'm 30 years old, and that's just not something I wanted to hear. And I said, "No, I think I'm a normal drinker." And I managed to dodge the bullet for a few more years. But when you're drinking every night and you're getting drunk every night, it's going to start becoming noticeable. But a wonderful thing did happen. I changed jobs, got out of that radio job, and got into the line of work I'm in now. I was working for a company in Fayetteville, but I was based over here, and I worked out of my home. And for an alcoholic, that's just a dream come true, because I don't have to get up and go to work. My supervisor would usually call about 10 o'clock in the morning to check in with me, and some mornings I'd still be in the bed when I'd answer the phone, and I'd make him think I'd been awake for 2 hours. And so that probably masked the problem and got me from getting probably intervention sooner than I did. And so I got married in 90, and so probably by 94, and I have made amends with my ex-wife. We're actually friends now. We've talked about this, but probably from about 94 until early part of 96, I was drinking into blackouts a lot. And so there are a lot of blank spots in that period of time, things I don't remember. And she would have to tell me, she'd have to tell me things that happened, and I missed a lot of things in her life and her kids' life and my family and my sister and stuff she was involved in, because when all I wanted to do was get drunk every night. And if you're by yourself, it's fine, but when you're married, when she has to come out at 2 o'clock in the morning and find me passed out by a tree in the front yard, which apparently I just had one of the things I like to do was roam out in the yard at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and sit under this tree. And then she'd ask me the next morning, "What the hell were you doing out in the front yard?" And I'd go, "What are you talking about?" Because I didn't remember it, so she'd have to tell me, or I'd wake up in the bathtub and where I had pulled the shower curtain down because I tripped and fell in it and was too drunk to get out. And so those kind of things were happening a lot. And so I was spiraling toward a pretty bad situation in early 96. And she had told me maybe 6 months before that, she used the A word. "I think you might be an alcoholic." And that was like nails on a chalkboard when she said that. It was just, I didn't want to hear that. And she was laying out a good case for it. And so she said something to me, and I'll never forget this. She said, "If you don't think you have a problem with alcohol, then just don't drink for a while." And as I told you, I'm hard-headed, and I'm going to prove her wrong. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to quit drinking for a while." And this 10 days that I made it 10 days without drinking. I'm textbook. When I read the doctor's opinion and it talked about the mental obsession, I got it. because all I thought about those 10 days was drinking. And I'd ask her, okay, well, I made it through the day without drinking. How many more days do I have to go to prove to you that I don't have a drinking problem? I mean, I thought about it, and so when I got to the 10, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable, and she knew it. I think she took secret pleasure in it to see how long I was going to do this little experiment. And I remember we went to the grocery store, and I know no normal person would do this. I went strutting by the beer aisle with my chest poked out, saying, "Look, it's not bothering me, but it's right here." You know, I get it. I get the mental obsession part. And so after 10 days, I declared myself not an alcoholic. I said, if I can go 10 days without drinking, there's no way I'm an alcoholic. 6 months later, on a Sunday night, February the 5th of '96, I remember the date, Sunday night, I had gone underground with my drinking. I'd started hiding the liquor, and I was putting them in mixer bottles so that she wouldn't know how much alcohol I was consuming. And anytime, you know, our bedroom was upstairs, and anytime she needed something, I was Johnny on the spot. I'll run downstairs and get it for you. You know, but I also had them upstairs too, so I was covered, and I went to the bathroom a lot too, because I was getting to that point where I can see it now. I had to drink. You know, it's just the way I was. It was, but we were getting ready to go to bed, and I was loading the wood stove up, and I was trying to jam this log in. It was not going to fit. She was standing behind me. In my mind, I hear her nagging and telling me I'm an idiot. It's not going to work. And, you know, yeah. She was telling me, "Stop! You're going to burn the house down." Because I was jiggling that, I was pushing that thing so hard, I could have pulled something out of the side of the house, and I'd have set the house on fire. So I thanked her, you know, for saving our lives and me not burning the house down. So I kicked the table over and threw the poker at her, or I threw it toward her. And luckily it hit the door jamb and not her. And I decided I'd go outside and sleep in the shed that night. February the 5th, 1996, we'd had an ice storm a couple of nights ago. It was 12 degrees outside. I'm going to sleep in the shed. And I went in the shed. I actually went out in there and made a little, and about 30 minutes later, I guess she had a moment of compassion for me, as mad as she was, and we've talked about it. It said, "You come inside, but you don't go upstairs." So we had this yellow lab, and he was growling at me, and that scared me. Now that scared me. The dog, she didn't scare me. The dog growling at me, though, that bothered me. And so they went upstairs, and so the next morning, I got the ultimatum. Basically, she said, "You either get help or you get the hell out." That was it. And I was laying there on the couch. Of course, I knew when I woke up on the couch the next morning that was not a good thing. You know, when she comes down, I could tell by the look on her face, which I'd seen many times before, but this one was different. And she said, "You need help. You know, you need help. You are an alcoholic." And you know, her mom had been through the treatment center in Pinehurst for alcoholism, and her dad was a functional alcoholic. So, damn it, she knew about alcoholism. It's like, I wish you'd told me that up front. I'd have never married you. So she knew. I mean, she knew a little bit about the disease, and I didn't see it as a disease at that point. And so, you know, my mind is working at this point because I thought if I have to do something really drastic, like go to detox or treatment, people are going to find out. And that's where the ego kicked in, because I'm like, people are going to find out, you know, I'm not this perfect person that I was trying to present myself at work. And I married into her church and got elected to a position of leadership. And I was worried about people finding out about me. So I said, "Can we do this discreetly?" And she said, "I don't care how you do it. We got to get you help." So we live right behind the hospital over in Village Acres. And so she took me over there Monday morning and basically deposited my ass at the emergency room and said, "See ya." Well, she made sure I got checked in, and then she said, "You know, when you need something, you know, call me and she did get nice later, but and rightfully so. She was really aggravated with me. And so I'm in the ER that morning, and the nurse was, you know, they were going through all the stuff you have to do and figuring out. They knew right away, I guess, that I needed to go to detox. And all of a sudden I got the bright idea, once they started talking about detox and treatment center and alcoholism, I thought, no, I don't have I got a mental problem. Y'all need to put me in the psych ward for 30 days. So I was more comfortable with being in the psych ward with acting like I had a mental illness or some kind of a mental problem than being called an alcoholic. And they said, no, you've got to be in detox, and there's not any beds in the psych ward right now anyway, and if you're in the hospital already, when a bed opens up, you'll have a better chance of getting it. Well, the person that was telling me all this was Wayne Morton. Some of you might know him. He's one of us. And he knew I was too, even though I didn't at the time. And he told me later that was total BS, that they knew that I needed to be in detox. So that's where I went. So I spent a wonderful week in detox. Back in those days, if you remember the 28-day Pinehurst Treatment Center, the detox was down at the end of the hall, like a little 4 or 5 bedroom ward. And so that's where I went. They took me up there Monday morning, and I guess I'm on Valium or whatever they put you on to keep you calm and level. And so Tuesday night, they normally took the treatment center people out to meetings in the area. They had a bus, but because of the ice, they didn't do it. So they did an AA meeting up there. So my very first AA meeting was in the Pinehurst Treatment Center, and I guess the nurse told me it might be a good idea for you to go to this meeting. And I didn't know what AA was. I had no clue. I'd heard the term, but I had no clue what it was. And so they told me to go, and I went. And all the treatment center people came in, and then there was 3 or 4 of us from detox, and all of us were sitting there against the back of the wall, and they did chips at the end of the meeting. And so when they came for the white chip, the first one, y'all know how the drill works. They offer the chips, and if you want it, you come get it. Well, they brought me a chip. And the other guy sitting next to me, and that just really made me mad. I had an immediate resentment because I thought I wasn't even given a choice in a white chip. And so when Friday came, I was given an option. The company I worked for had good insurance. They said, you can go through a 28-day inpatient program if you want to do that. It'll fit within what they'll pay, or you can do the intensive outpatient. So I went from Monday wanting a 30-day vacation from the world in the psych ward to Friday when I started feeling a little better. Oh no, the world can't get along without me in it. There's no way I'm going to be locked up for 28 days. I'll do the outpatient. And that's what I did. And I went and met Ted Clark. Some of you might remember him, Ted Steve, wonderful, wonderful man. He sat down with him that Monday morning for my introduction to intensive outpatient. First thing the man said when I walked in was, "We've been waiting on you." And I guess he remembered my mom, and he was telling me this, what I thought was BS about the heredity, about alcoholism being in families and that kind of stuff, and it runs strong in the mother-son connection, and whatever, just where do I need to go? So I think he probably knew I was not serious about it, but I went through this 6-week program, met a wonderful lady, Nancy Patton King, who was the IOP counselor, and she's a recovering alcoholic. Later would become a very dear friend and an important person in my life. But starting out intensive outpatient, I hated her. I called her the AA Nazi, because she told me, if you're going to do outpatient, you got to go to AA. And I really thought AA was just where people went, like rooms like this or in a church basement where it's smoky and people sit around and whine and complain about how life sucks because we can't drink. And I thought, if that's the way it's going to be, I don't want any part of that. And she said, that's not, you go to AA. And so I put her off for about a week. And so again, the ego kicked in. I thought, I can't go to an AA meeting in Southern Pines or Pinehurst in that area because too many people will know me. So I'll go up to Vass. Nobody will know me up there. Half of Pinehurst was up there, and including 2 people that knew me. And that made me mad. I thought, so much for the anonymity part of it. But they were nice, and people stuck out their hands, and I don't remember a lot of what was said that night. But the thing I do remember that really struck me was how happy people seemed. And I heard people laughing. And so I continued to, I ended up doing what was suggested before I got done with that 6-week outpatient. I ended up getting a home group. It was the big book group at Brownson. The home group I'm in now had not been formed at that point, so Tom Ivester and several of those fellows that started PPG were still in big books. That's where I met Tom and my first two sponsors, actually. And so I got a home group, I got a sponsor. Tom actually helped me with that. Tom I helped me with my first sponsor. And it was a good guy. His guy's name was Wayne. His wife Julie was in the program, and he was a big book thumper, and he lived near me, and he came to my house every Saturday morning, and he said, put on coffee. I want it strong, like motor oil strong. I don't want weak stuff, and he was very clear about that. And we'd go out in my office, and we'd read. And about 4 months sober, he had to move back to, he was from the Chicago area. He had to go back to Chicago. So I went back to Tom, and I said, oh, I need a new sponsor. So he hooked me up with this old guy. He seemed old to me. He was probably my age now. He was in his 50s. That seemed old to me then when I was 35 or 34. So he hooked me up with this old guy and said, well, let him do it. Now, Chuck will love this one. This guy was not only the biggest Carolina fan that you can imagine, he played football there. Back when they had the leather helmets is what I used to joke with him, because I thought, you're old. And I was not real happy about it, but Dick Starner is his name, and we started back, and I was going to give the guy a try. And but the other thing that was happening in my life was, my wife, I was still married, and she had hope. She had hope that I was going to get better, and I really wasn't. I was really using AA as kind of a dodge. I get out of the house for an hour every night to get away from her. That was one of the benefits of AA. And I don't know what it is about the 5th of the month. There's a February 5th and August the 5th, which was a Sunday. We had a conversation, and she said, I don't see any change in you. I don't see, and not that she was expecting a miracle in 6 months, but I think maybe just some kind of an inkling, some kind of positive move, I think might have helped things. And she made a comment to me, and I'll never forget this. She said, you're basically the same mean son of a bitch you were before, when you were still drinking, you might as well drink. Well, I'm sure everybody in this room knows what I did that night. And I was really angry because she did this to me on a Sunday when the liquor stores were closed. So something triggered this thought in my mind when I was coming here tonight and made me think of that. Makes me remember this. So I went off to the convenience store and got a 12-pack of Ice House beer. I remember the brand of the beer I got that night. This was August the 5th of 96. I went and got a 12-pack of Ice House beer, went out in my office by myself, drank it, and was telling myself, I don't have a drinking problem. She's my problem. And I just saw these two fellas I was gassing up before I came over here tonight because I'd been driving with the light on. I was going to run that thing down. I'm sure nobody else has done that where you see how far you can get your gas needle down. But I had to stop and get gas, and these two guys walked out with 12 packs, and I just laughed when I thought about that because that wouldn't do it for me now. So I had to do that 12-pack that night until the liquor stores got opened up, and by the end of 96, we got separated. I got in this ratty old apartment in Southern Pines. I had to have somewhere where they let me have the dog. I got away from her, and I thought life's going to be good now. And if you're happy and you drink a lot, you can't be an alcoholic. That's how I had it in my mind. And I proceeded over from August the 5th until October the 23rd of 97. I proceeded to do some of the worst drinking that I had ever done. And it just spiraled right back, out of control, And I was totally, by the time I quit drinking, I was just almost totally removed from society. I had hardly any contact with my family, and the drinking, which I had used as a way to get me in with the crowd, and had used that for so long and loved the way alcohol made me feel. By the end of my drinking, that was all gone. I spent years, we all know we spend years chasing that, trying to get that back, and it just never happened. And I'll say this is where the drinking ends. I was doing shots of Aristocrat vodka and chasing it with Budweiser. That's where my drinking took me. That was, Chuck would like that. That Aristocrat stuff was nasty, but I reached the point where I had to drink. And when I tried to slow it and stop it a few months before I finally threw in the towel, I couldn't, and it scared me. And about 2 weeks before, or actually no, about a month before I finally made the decision to throw in the towel on drinking, for some reason I'd gotten rid of all those AA books when I went back out the door in '96, but I did not throw my big book away. And this is I've been told is maybe God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I remember going in the closet one night and I got that big book out and I set it on the bookshelf in the living room. Now I didn't read it, but I took it out and it was sitting there, and I think in my subconscious I knew where the solution was. I just wasn't ready to quite take that leap. And the pastors at the church I was going to, after a church council meeting, sat me down one night and basically did a 2-man intervention on me. And I danced all around I had all kinds of problems. My family hated me. I didn't have any friends. I'm broke. But I don't have a drinking problem. And they said, we think you do have a drinking problem. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, or actually it was on a Thursday night, I had come home from a building committee meeting at my church. And I left early, like I had been doing for months, because I didn't want people to feel my hands, because they stood up and held hands and said the Lord's Prayer after these committee and business meetings at church, like we do in AA, and I didn't want people feeling my hands shake. So I left early, came home that night, and when I walked in the kitchen, something happened, and I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I froze. I was standing there in the kitchen. I'll never forget it. And of course, it fooled the dog, because I usually came in the front, so he was on the couch waiting, and so I guess he heard me come in the back, and so his name was Gabriel's yellow lab. He came flying in the kitchen, tail wagging, and as soon as he hit the door jamb where I was standing in the kitchen, and that's a smart dog, he put the brake. Even the dog knew something was wrong, just by I don't know if it was the look in my face, and that dog got by my side and kind of stayed by my side that whole night, because I was like, what am I going to do? I thought, I couldn't imagine going on like I was, but then I couldn't imagine not drinking either. And I did the stupidest thing that I probably could have ever done, and I went to bed. And I was told later by my doctor, with the amount of I was drinking easily a fifth, I could have easily gone into DTs and maybe died, but I didn't. It was a miserable night. I lived. I made it to Friday, and Saturday morning I went to a men's breakfast at the church and asked the pastors and they knew something was wrong right away when I showed up at 8 o'clock. Yeah, that was early for me, and they knew something was not right for me to be there at 8 o'clock on a Saturday. And I said, can I talk to you guys afterwards? And they said, by all means. And so I went back to that same office, the senior pastor's office, and said, you guys were absolutely right about me. I'm an alcoholic. And it was the first time that I ever said that and meant it. And I knew it right there. And so, they knew a little bit about alcoholism and AA, and so he asked me, the senior pastor asked me, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I think maybe I might need to go back to AA. And he said, do you think, or do you know? And I knew, but again, it still took me a couple of weeks to get up the nerve to go back, because the ego kicked in. I thought people are going to remember that I was in AA before and that I was a failure, and when I finally went back to that Friday night beginners meeting at the hospital, people were welcoming me back, hugging me, and not Chuck, but others. And when the white chip came, I was sitting in the back. I was still sitting back there with those guys. When the white chip came that night, I was already halfway down the side aisle to get it, when they were getting ready to do the chips, because that's how bad I wanted it, because I was hurting pretty bad, and my bottom was not one with legal intervention or anything like that, but that's not to say that I never did. I did plenty of stuff illegal. I drunk plenty of times. I just never got caught. My bottom was more of an emotional bottom, but it was bad enough. And so I went and picked up that white chip that night, and it had a whole different feeling and a whole different meaning to me than it did before. And I started going to meetings every night, and those meetings became little oases, little islands of, man, I knew I got to a meeting that night, I wasn't going to drink that day, because I had a real fear, and I was afraid I was going to have to go through the rest of my life in fear of drinking. That was one of the things that really tortured me mentally. But I kind of noticed as time went along, I didn't think about the drinking as much anymore. And so after about 6 months, as a matter of fact, Primary Purpose Group, which is now my home group, had been formed, and I had talked to Tom, and I was trying to figure out where I would go for a home group. And at the time, the night they met, that was a night I had work assignments, and I knew I couldn't. He said that you need to go where you can make a commitment to that group. They're accountable to you, and you're accountable to them. And so I stuck my tail between my legs, and I went back to Big Book on a Tuesday night. It was the night of their speaker meeting, and back then it was in the basement of the old sanctuary. It's not even there anymore. And that's 2 buildings that are gone now since I've been sober. I guess that happens when time builds up. But after that meeting, I went up to Dick Starter and I said, would you, and I had to get the nerve up, and I said, would you consider being my sponsor again? And he didn't, without hesitation, said absolutely. And so we started back and went right back through the steps. This time I got through them. I never did a 4th and 5th the first time. And I got through those steps. I was still going to a lot of meetings. And, my life started getting better. And I don't know where it happened, but somewhere along the way, the mental obsession that I was telling you about with me, which was I was eating up with it, was gone. I didn't think about drinking anymore. It was just not there. And I'm going to tell you, when I had that realization, that was a wonderful feeling, because I thought, man, I'm not going to have to live in fear of drinking for the rest of my life like I thought. But I found, over the years that followed, that it's actually way better than that. And the night I picked up my first year medallion at Big Book, 2 dear people, some of you that have been around will remember them, Jack Leonard and Penny. Penny's an angel, I'm convinced, and Jack is too. They were there that night, and I was standing there when I got my 1-year medallion, and I was doing I'd like to thank the Academy speech that we all do, thanking everybody and talking about how great things are. And I said, I just could not imagine it being any better than this. And Jack and Penny came up to me, and Penny kind of grabbed me by the face, sort of like Payne Stewart when he grabbed Phil Mickelson on the 18th hole of the 99 Open, and said, stick around, David. You're going to find out it's going to get a lot better. And she knew what she was talking about. Over the course of time, my life's gotten a lot better. And I've managed to get through some difficult times without drinking. And that's because I've stayed involved in AA. And I've kept that at the center of everything that I do. And actually, I thought I was kind of lucky, because I've heard people tell stories, heartbreaking stories of things they've gotten through in sobriety, even early sobriety. And I went through 2012, in March of 2012, my sponsor died unexpectedly. He'd been ill, and one of the greatest gifts of sobriety was I got to be there at the hospital with him and his family. I was with him when he died, and that's just something I'll never forget. My own father was also in the hospital recuperating from back surgery, and 2 months later, he died unexpectedly. So the 2 most important men in my life were gone within a period of 2 months of each other, and I never thought about drinking. And the night after my dad died, I told my family I need to go to an AA meeting. It was Friday night, and I went to an AA meeting, and I shared what was going on with me, and AA surrounded me. I had people, sometimes, people I didn't even know would come up to me, and I got cards from several different groups, texts from people, emails from people every day, and AA literally, I finally understood what I'd heard other people talk about. AA carried me through that, and I didn't have a desire to drink. And, it just reinforced to me the importance of why I do what I do, and I stay involved in this program. And through the courses and things in my life and my job, I ended up changing home groups 3 years ago over to Primary Purpose. And I'd done service work, but I'd not done a lot. And when I got involved over there, I got on a couple of committees. And one of the things I think is really cool, our group, Primary Purpose and Keeping It Sober, partner together on some stuff, like going over to treatment and corrections and stuff. So we work together to, we go to treatment now 7 nights a week. And so I got involved in a couple of committees, and I got myself 3 years ago elected as a GSR, and I'd never done that before. And I got to go to my first AA assembly. the area assembly in Raleigh. And my eyes were opened up to a whole nother specter of AA and how big this is, and it was really cool. And those 2 years of being the GSR and going to the area assemblies and everything that was just what a blessing. And as Chuck said, I mean, I'm DCM, but it's because Jason left. So, I mean, I was elected the alternate. I wanted to continue serving. And general service work is very important to me, and it's something that any chance I get to stress with people I do, because, you know, carrying the message and going to treatment and correction stuff is really important, but general service is too. Because we got to have AA here so we can go do what we do and carry the message, and so people have to be willing to step up and do that kind of stuff. And so I just, you know, I made that commitment. So I was going up. I'd been going to district meetings, and so I agreed and was elected the alternate back in December, thinking I'd have 2 years with Jason as the DCM, and then in May he took a job in Ohio, and I'm the DCM. And but I agreed to do it. I'd made the commitment when I was elected alternate that you know, when my time came, if I was elected to be the DCM, I would do that, because, as I said, this is important to me, and I want to continue doing and serving AA in any and every way I can. And this is a great way. It's just a great way to do it. And so, you know, I'm going to continue doing that as long as I'm able, because I think about back to October the 23rd of '97, when I finally did come back through the doors of AA. You know, there were people there waiting on me when I got there, and there were people that were carrying a message to me when I needed it. And I have always said, you know, they've never forgotten that, and I want to make sure I do everything I can to be there when the new person comes through the door now, and in many different ways. And last thing I'll say, because one thing I have not talked about that's vitally important is the spiritual side of this thing. I grew up going to church, made to go to church, hated church, didn't like it, even though I married into it. When I got married into it and got all involved and made it look good. I'd never really put trust in anything, you know, anything greater than myself, certainly not God. And I sure never prayed. And but I was told when I came into AA that I was going to have to be willing to place a dependence in a power greater than myself. And alcohol finally put me in a position to do that. I was finally beaten down to the point where I was willing to believe, or I was willing to try. And I'd been sober. This was in December of '97. So I'd been sober a couple of months, and the obsession was still there a little bit, and there were other things going on when I was going through the divorce, and there was just this crushing. Just in my mind, I worked things up. And one night, I got down on my knees for the first time since I was a kid. I got down on my knees by my bed, and I said, God, please give me some relief. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I felt a sense of peace come over me. I got in bed that night and slept, and from that point forward, I've never doubted the existence of a God of my understanding. And every morning, I ask that God to help me stay sober today, and I haven't found it necessary to drink. And, you know, that little prayer in the morning has gotten a little bit more complicated, you know, because I also ask God to, you know, to help me if I'm put in a position to help another person, to carry the message or to be of maximum service to our fellows, to please help me do that to the best of my ability. And I've tried to do that to the best of my ability during my time in recovery. So that spiritual experience became real for me at that night. And as I said, I've never doubted the existence of God. And one of the neat things about being around, and I used to hear people say this when I was new in sobriety, was, you know, you have to stick around to see these things happen. You know, because a miracle happened in my life. There's no doubt in my mind. And I've been around now a little while, and I've seen the miracle happen hundreds of times in other people. And I swear it's way more fun to watch it happen to other people. I mean, I was glad it happened to me. But I get more joy out of watching this happen with other people when they come in and you see them literally come back to life. Because that's what happened to me. I mean, I was off the heap. I was dying. I was physically dying. So I was rescued, and, you know, I came back to a whole nother life. And I used to joke early on about I'm going to be sentenced to a life in AA. And my first sponsor, Dick Starr, told me, yeah, you've been sentenced to a life, all right. You've been sentenced to a life far greater than anything that you could have ever imagined. And he's absolutely right. And it's because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and God and you people. So, thank you.